I would like to welcome you to this wonderful and rather unusual conference.
In an open and impartial atmosphere.
Now it's starting now.
And here the three letters Nun, Bet, Yud, and who knows what after it. The second line does not start at the beginning of the field designated for an inscription, but rather is indented, as if an attempt had been made to write the second word in the middle of the line for purposes of symmetry. However, this is only a supposition because the left side of the Bulla cannot be reconstructed due to its true state of preservation. Eilat Mazar has presented a number of proposals for reconstructing the inscription. The first and most attractive is to add an aleph to the word Navi, which will then be read prophet, but it spoiled the symmetry. The completed inscription would read Isaiah the prophet, to Isaiah or belong to Isaiah the prophet. This proposal is the most tempting because next to Hezekiah it places the prophet of his generation, to whom the Bible ascribes quite close ties to the king. That prophet is Isaiah, son of Amoz. Other proposals see the word Nun Bet Yud as complete as it is and interpret it as possibly the place of origin of the Bulla owner, perhaps the town of Nov, which appears in a number of parallels from this period. It is also possible that Nun Bet Yud is a name which appears in a few parallels from this period on Bulla. It is not a biblical name. In that case, it will be the name of the father of the Isaiah mentioned in the Bulla, so he is not Yeshayahu, son of Amoz, but Yeshayahu, son of Novai, other Yeshayahu. Although the word for son, ben, does not appear. The lack of the word son in itself is not unusual. Quite a few Bulla contain only two names, as the Bulla of Chizkiyahu Achaz, and not son of Achaz. Quite a few Bulla contains only two names, one on top of the other, the bottom name being that of the father. Each of these proposals has its advantages and disadvantages. The letter Aleph at the end of the second line is not certain. If the intent had in fact been to center the bottom line under the top line, no letter at all need have been added. The reading of the word Navi without the Aleph makes this possibility unlikely. Even with the additional letter, we would have accepted the letter Hey, the definite article in Hebrew, to appear, rendering the phrase Isaiah the prophet, the usual biblical format. And if we consider the word Navi to be the name of a profession, both possibilities appear in the Bible, that is, with and without the definite article, as Mazar notes in her publication. Of course, if the addition of the definite article is correct, it sheds new light on the relationship between the king and the prophet, because the context of the site where the Bulla was found is commercial, an aspect that no one has so far taken into account. The suggestion that Novi should be regarded as a place or residence or region is a possibility, although here too we would expect the definite article before the place name. But the Bible contains such references without the definite article. Yerovam ben Nevat Ephrati. Yerovam son of Nevat, from Ephraim, without the ha. But no much examples have been found in the Bulla so far discovered. The name of the father without the word son, on the other hand, is quite common. And that, in that case, we would not expect the definite article to be present. Having presented the data, deciding among the above possibilities is a matter of judgment. The minimalist reader who does not tend toward adding letters without a proven necessity would prefer the theory that the word Novai is the name of the father. The second possibility is from Nov, and the third possibility is prophet. The first possibility requires no additions and raises no problem of a missing definite article. The second, lack of a definite article, but it's not so. The third possibility required the addition of the letter Aleph and the lack of a definite article. So purely epigraphic consideration would lead to the conclusion that this is the first possibility, this is the second, and this is the third. That's what I told to Eilat. I would give 60% to this possibility, 25 to this, and 15 to the third. She decided what she decided. It seems that context can be arranged in three circles, each one wider than the one inside it. In the first circle is the immediate and technical context. What can be clearly read and what can be assumed, as well as direct parallels and the general condition of the find. That is, in the case of Isaiah Bulla, what are the names that appear on bullae? Does the title prophet indeed exist on such objects? And if not, what are the phrases closest to the words that may be securely identified? This interpretation is very limited, and yet in itself is already allows us not to set limits on the letters we present, but rather to propose filling them out with a certain level of probability and to suggest alternatives on levels of lesser probability. Alternatives are necessary because we know that the technical immediate context is not the only one, but the span of alternatives presents boundaries of caution for interpretation based on the broader context. The broader context include elements that are uncertain. What was the presumed function of the find in the place where it was discovered? Was its significance economic, administrative, or social? What it was used for? The space for assumption here is broader and less certain, but without it, the find remains somewhat dry, lacking real significance beyond just another item for a database. So the second phase of the discussion sets aside the purely epigraphic aspect and attempts to access circumstantial probability, that is, to understand the circumstances under which the inscription was written, and in this way access what the Bulla says. Here we must concede that we lack crucial data that might fundamentally change the picture. We do not really know the nature of the relationship among the people who used the site at that time, and whether such ties went beyond the business world. Despite the large number of bulla in our possession, neither do we know exactly how the client or the user regarded the inscription on the bulla and what he or she expected to find in it. Was the information of this person's private seal meant to securely identify its owner for business purposes? Or did the seal also have a social function, a kind of declaration or logo? In ancient times, most owners of seals would decorate them with some sort of image. It seems that toward the 7th century, this custom waned. The seal of Hezekiah bears symbols, and in that case, the seal apparently did more than merely identify its owner. After all, the owner was the king himself. But the significance for other people is more difficult to know. As would be expected, the possibility of reading the word Navi as prophet has stirred the imagination of people interested in the subject for a number of reasons. Among lay people, there are many who seek any evidence confirming or contradicting the biblical account. Direct proof of the existence of a prophet by the name of Isaiah at the time of King Hezekiah would be a cause for rejoicing. But it is not our focus here. It's for other discussion. Still, the possibility that this is the correct reading cannot be ignored. The likelihood is not great of finding names that are coincidentally also mentioned in the Bible. Mazar notes another such case in the City of David excavations, but these are isolated instances among many dozens of bullae found. Finding Hezekiah and Isaiah a few hundred meters apart is undoubtedly further circumstantial evidence that indeed the owner of the bulla was the prophet. So, the broader context touches on culture as well as literary phenomena that can be ascribed to the object based on the context on the broader level and can also involve religious beliefs. This level of consideration is more attractive, and in the end, it is what every scholar seeks in order to leave his or her stamp on the research. But precisely because of that, this level must be presented with great caution, stressing all the previous levels of context, strictly separating the facts from the context on the first, second, or third levels. While the media will eventually do what it likes, scholars must carry out their task faithfully. So if this is the seal of Isaiah the prophet, and that is the third circle, what was the meaning of his choice to know this on his seal? Seals, as we recall, were mainly used in business transactions and bureaucracy. Was being a prophet a profession? in every sense? Did the term reveal the social status of the bearer? Biblical evidence comes from the words of Amos, the prophet, to Amaziah, priest of Bethel. In the same period, I was no prophet, neither was a prophet's son, spoken in response to the priest's rebuke. O thou seer, go, flee away into the land of Judah, and there eat bread, and prophesy there. These verses can provide proof, at least in the northern kingdom, that as was the custom in the ancient Near East, being a prophet was a paid profession, certainly during the time of the temple. Can the conclusion be drawn that this was the situation in the kingdom of Judah as well? Or perhaps the opposite was true? And the most words show that this was not the case. Prophets, as a general term in the context of the temple, are mentioned in the Bible throughout the period. 100 years later, during Jeremiah's trial, which took place in the temple, there were prophets among those who took hold of him and sought to kill him. In Jeremiah 26. Jeremiah famously clashed in the temple court with Hananiah, son of Azur, chapter 28. It is reasonable to imagine that these prophets also received stipends of some sort, perhaps as professional diviners, alongside the priest. But would a prophet like Isaiah have also had such a status? Amos specifically excludes himself from these prophets. The biblical tradition regards Amos and the other later prophets as something different, not professional prophets, whose prophecies bore the scent of bias, delivered for payment. If indeed the owner of the seal was Isaiah, son of Amos, and he chose to present himself on business occasions as prophet, without the definite article, Isaiah, a prophet, not the prophet, a prophet. What does this say about his status and the status of prophecy in 8th century BC Judah? So if we take the third possibility, it's very meaningful, but very dangerous. So we have to be very, very careful. I advise her to, as I said before, I advise her to give the three possibilities in this order. But as I said, she decided otherwise, and the press jumped on here. But I have no absolute answers. I have only thought of methodological thoughts. As intriguingly, all these questions, they have no definite answers. After all, the entire discussion depends on circumstantial and epigraphic conclusions as to the correct reading of the Bulla, and this is the base. As the late Hagai often said, we may never know. I can only end this brief discussion with those same words. We may never know. And that's all. Thank you.